Today's Inspire to Thrive focus is on housing, and we're hearing from 2 Point Studio. They are an architecture and design firm that dedicates much of their time to improving the built environment through community development and equitable housing. 2 Point Studio works hard to assure the success of their projects, measured not only by budgets and schedules, but through the well-being of the residents who make these spaces their homes. We will now hear from their president, Kathleen Lechleiter.
Okay. I'm Kathleen Lechleiter with 2 Point Studio. I'm a principal here, and we've had our firm for approximately 20 years, and our major market is affordable housing. So my passion for housing started with a project that we worked on called the Baltimore Station. It's a men's residential treatment facility that serves men, primarily veterans, that were formerly homeless and suffer from substance abuse. And although I'd done housing projects before, that was probably the first project where really got involved and really made the connection with the residents, and that it was about the people that we were serving and not to pass judgment, more so than it was about any other issue regarding housing. Restart with Art was a fundraiser that we were involved with. There was a former resident, Tim Kelly, who was an artist who was actually trained at MICA, and we found out that he had scores of original paintings. And so we talked about different ways that we could utilize this, and we created a fundraiser that lasted for about 5 years. We had a committee that got involved, got MICA students involved with the design build to build that installation. And we got the men involved as a part of that program so that they were meeting people. We did a green roof installation where they had a garden for the kitchen, and it was just an ongoing sort of relationship with that organization. My current project that we're working on is about 150 single-family residences that are spread throughout the region in 5 different jurisdictions. So as we go through them, we're taking the photographs and we're sort of making an art installation. So there's 4 construction teams that are working to do this at a rate of about 10 to 12 houses a month in terms of how we're sort of progressing through this. It's a partnership between the Housing Authority and a nonprofit developer. And we're going into the neighborhoods to see what your typical house post-World War II housing stock is, which is readily available, but it's pretty tired and it needs upgrades. So we're going in and upgrading them, making them more energy efficient so the utility bills will be lower. And what they found with this public housing, the scattered site, is that by moving people to communities of opportunity, which they sort of classify as low poverty, there's strong schools, there's access to jobs, people actually flourish in these communities. So that's been a very rewarding project. So one of the things that's really touched me as a board member for the Women's Housing is some of the small things and some of the stories you hear from the residents. There's a particular woman that we were told a story by the executive director who, after facing the criminalization of homelessness, the ability then to find housing for her and bring her in, we designed these beautiful facilities, but her takeaway on that was she had a door to lock, and it was her privacy that she could, sort of, and security that was most important to her. Providing a door on the lock is such a simple thing, and I think we can't lose sight of that. So COVID has affected us directly, especially at Women's Housing. I've been amazed at both the staff and the residents in terms of their response. The staff has really stepped up, putting in lots of extra hours, sort of put these protocols in place to, make the residents assured that they'll be safe. And the residents have stepped up with a cleaning regimen, and so this whole sort of vulnerable population has really stepped up. So I think what you're currently seeing with the Black Lives Matter movement is all the inequities that exist and systemic racism. And I think historically what you'll find is housing injustice sort of is at the core of some of that. The process of redlining and zoning restrictions and ordinances from homeowners associations which limited where people of color and blacks could live. And I think that's just one example of that systemic racism and how that inequity has been perpetuated. So my passion for housing and where it'll go in the future, I think it's sort of thinking about where I've come from. So it began being an architect, working on housing projects, and then getting involved with some of these organizations, and becoming a board member and being an advocate. I'd like to see that actually move into policy if I can, so that it's not, I started just sort of filling out programmatic needs from somebody else, but I think if I could get involved in advocacy and more policy, that would be like where I would like to take it. I think one of the other things I would say in terms of that I'd like to speak to is that we talk about housing as a national issue in terms of affordability, which it is, but I think too often we forget about the individuals. And whether it's public housing, affordable housing, whatever it is, these are people's homes, and this is where children learn, it's where people cook and they have meals and they get together and community grows, and I think we can't lose sight of that, and I think that's why it's so important. It's irregardless of your income or your race, and I think architects specifically have a responsibility to design just and a fair housing for everybody.
Breaking Boundaries and IIDA MAC are proud to share that we are donating $300 to 2 Point Studio.